What if Rengoku became a demon in Demon Slayer? Picture the scene. The Mugen Train is speeding down the tracks at full throttle, and right in the middle of the intense battle between Rengoku and Akaza, something completely unexpected happens. Akaza, the upper rank 3 demon, looks at Rengoku, and rather than just slicing his head off like he would with any other demon slayer, drops a bombshell. What if you became a demon? I can give you power, immortality. You'd be even stronger. Now what? Rengoku, the Flame Hashira, is faced with a life-changing decision. Should he accept a demon's power or not? Let's be honest, Rengoku was already a beast. The man had enough strength to turn the tide of any battle and take out his enemies. But if he accepted the transformation, he'd join the ranks of the elite demons, meaning way more power. His flame style? Now, with a demonic twist still explosive, but nearly unbeatable. Imagine Rengoku throwing out fire attacks with insane regeneration, not even needing to worry about damage. Eternal flames, super speed healing, even more strength. It's like a cross between a dragon and the Human Torch, but with way more swagger. And here's where the real drama kicks in. Because if there's one thing everyone knew about Rengoku, it's that he stood for honor and strength. Everyone trusted him, but now he'd be a demon? That would shake the entire Demon Slayer Corps. Gyu, Shinobu, Mitsuri, they'd all look at Rengoku like, what the hell is going on? The reaction would be pure shock. And Tanjiro, his emotional side would absolutely explode. He'd be staring at his mentor, the one he admired, the symbol of strength and integrity, now becoming a demon. What would he do? Try to save his soul? Fight him? Or maybe try to understand what really happened? Either way, things would get tense. And let's be real, Zenitsu and Inosuke, they wouldn't be ready for Demon Rengoku. Like, wait, the guy who trained us is now trying to kill us? It'd be double the drama, and their bond with Rengoku would shift from mentor to enemy. Now here's the suspenseful part. Would Rengoku actually accept Akaza's offer? And if he did, what would he do with that power? One thing's for sure, Rengoku isn't someone who's easily manipulated. Even with the transformation, he'd still carry that lingering sense of honor. So the real dilemma would be, would he become fully loyal to Akaza and the demon's cause, or would he cling to his human ethics, his desire to protect the innocent, and maybe even rebel against Akaza himself? That would set up a really compelling dynamic. Because even though Akaza might have the power to turn Rengoku into a demon, Rengoku's loyalty to humanity could still limit him. He'd be stuck in a moral tug of war. Sure, he's immortal now, but does he still care about people? Or would he be consumed by his demonic nature and start killing without mercy? That inner conflict would tear Rengoku apart. He'd look at his friends, and all he'd feel is the fire inside him, waging war against who he used to be. It'd be epic and heartbreaking. Now, imagine a battle between Rengoku and the other Hashira. They knew he was strong. He was the most reliable one, the guy everyone looked up to, but now they'd have to face a Rengoku who had become the very thing they swore to destroy. Simple answer, it wouldn't be easy. His flame style, already destructive, would now be lethal. Picture Rengoku transforming mid-fight and instead of normal fire techniques, using demonic energy to unleash black flames, something totally unnatural, even for him. If the other Hashira tried to take him down, they'd have to unite in a way they never had before. Probably with help from Tanjiro, who wouldn't be in the emotional place to just kill his mentor. Instead, he might try to save him, or at least understand what's going on inside his mind. But honestly, it would be a brutal fight, because on top of his insane strength and fast healing, there's the emotional weight. The other Hashira would be torn between their duty as demon slayers and their bond with the former flame pillar. Their moral compass would be seriously tested. The whole Mugen Train scene would become an emotional and physical battlefield where Rengoku's fate and the possibility of what he might become would hang in the balance. By accepting Akaza's offer, he wouldn't just become a demon. He'd become a symbol of inner conflict, a reflection of the struggle between his loyalty to humanity and the seductive pull of immortality and power. His transformation wouldn't just be a physical change, it'd be a twist that would impact everyone around him in ways no one could have seen coming. Right after the transformation, Rengoku would feel the demonic energy rushing through his body, boosting his senses, his strength, and his ability to heal. His fire techniques, already powerful, would now burn with a hellish aura. The flames became more intense, more merciless, as if the very essence of a demon had fused with his unique fighting style. What was once a weapon to protect the innocent now risked becoming a tool of destruction. The first major shift, his personality. Even though he still held on to some of his values, his demonic nature constantly pulled him toward the darkness. He still wanted to protect people, but deep down, something inside him whispered to destroy them. That mental tug-of-war was constant and agonizing. Meanwhile, Akaza, thinking he had just created a powerful new ally, started planning how Rengoku could be useful, not just as a fighter, but as a key part of his destructive goals. But there was one problem. Rengoku wasn't easy to control. Even though he was now physically a demon, his soul was still divided. The voice of his humanity, though faint, hadn't gone silent. Akaza knew it, and his first challenge was to get Rengoku to fully embrace his new self, to let go of everything from his days as a demon slayer. The real shock, however, came when Rengoku, now a newly turned demon, saw his former Hashira comrades arrive at the scene. As he looked at them, a deep wave of sorrow washed over the heart of the new demon. Gyu, Shinobu, Mitsuri, and the others stared back in disbelief, their faces filled with pain. They still saw Rengoku as a hero, the Flame Hashira who had always inspired trust and courage. But now, he was a monster, and his eyes no longer held the same light. Their reactions were instant. Suspicion, anguish, even anger. The tension was almost tangible. Tanjiro, who had always looked up to Rengoku as a symbol of strength, saw in him everything he aspired to be, the ideal demon slayer, unwavering and noble. Now, the face of his mentor was marked by the curse of demons. Inosuke didn't hesitate to scream and attack, fueled by rage and unable to process what he was seeing. Poor Zenitsu, was frozen in place, overwhelmed by pain and confusion, unable to believe his eyes. But the most devastated of all was without a doubt Tanjiro. He hadn't just lost a mentor, he had lost a friend. Rengoku's eyes, once full of warmth and resolve, now reflected a soul torn between good and evil. The battle that followed was a clash of brutal force and conflicted emotions. The other Hashira were heartbroken, but they knew they couldn't let Rengoku continue to exist as a demon. He was no longer the same man, and if left unchecked, he posed a threat greater than even the upper moons. Rengoku, on the other hand, was fighting himself, struggling to hold on to a shred of his humanity, even as the demon inside him demanded he fight with everything he had. Rengoku wielded his flames with a ferocity no one had ever seen. His attacks fast, destructive, and paired with a shockingly strong defense. Using demonic regeneration, he could recover almost instantly. He moved with deadly precision, exploiting the weaknesses of his former comrades, but he didn't want to kill them. Every blow had the power to end a Hashira's life, yet somehow it felt more like he was trying to push them back than destroy them. He still loved them, but his mind was clouded. Realizing this was more than just a physical battle, Tanjiro tried to reach Rengoku with words. He knew that talking might be the only way to reach the friend now lost to darkness. He spoke of memories, of what Rengoku meant to him and to everyone, trying to bring back the honorable, kind man he once was. But the demon within Rengoku was too strong, and Tanjiro's words began to fade, like cries lost in a storm. What started as a spiritual conflict soon turned into a full-blown war of both internal and external forces. Then Akaza stepped in. Sensing things spiraling out of control, he began to intervene, fueling Rengoku's demonic side, offering him more power, more strength. He knew that if he could fully convert Rengoku into a loyal demon, he'd become a key player in the fight against Muzan and achieving their ultimate goal. Yet deep down, Akaza felt threatened, because he knew that a Rengoku with a divided heart could never be fully trusted by the demons. As the battle intensified, Rengoku's fate became more unpredictable. The fight between the Hashira and Demon Rengoku became a mirror of the war, raging inside his own soul. But deep down, more than anything, Rengoku longed to find a way back to who he used to be. He didn't want to be a killing machine, but the power he now held made it impossible to return to his old life. The question was, could a demon be saved without losing what little was left of their essence? This conflict was far from resolved, and the Infinity Train was no longer just a site of destruction. It had become the stage for an existential crisis. Would Rengoku's fire consume everything, or could he find a way to extinguish the flames? Rengoku's future, along with that of the Hashira and even the demons themselves, was uncertain. As the train roared down the tracks, no one knew where this journey would lead. But one thing was clear. The battle unfolding here carried more at stake than anyone could have imagined. Now, imagine the tragedy that unfolded on Mount Nadagumo takes on a whole new dimension with the presence of Rengoku, the Flame Hashira, but no longer human. Instead of sacrificing himself to protect his friends, he now finds himself among the demons. His body turned into an immortal engine of destruction, black flames burning in his fists, and terrifying regeneration coursing through him. While Tanjiro and his companions fight against the mountain's demons, Rengoku is caught in an existential dilemma. As soon as the fight against the lesser demons begins, one thing becomes clear: Rengoku's power is off the charts. As a high-ranking demon, his physical strength would be 1,000 times greater than any creature lurking on Mount Nadagumo. There would be no need for drawn-out battles to defeat the lesser demons. He would simply incinerate them. In the blink of an eye, the very demons causing all the chaos would be wiped out effortlessly. And while this might seem like an easy win for the team, it posed a deeper moral problem for Rengoku. He was now part of the very army of monsters they had sworn to destroy. At the same time, Rengoku's presence imposing and overwhelming carried an aura of inner conflict. Every time he killed a demon, a part of him rebelled inside, questioning whether he should continue down this path of destruction or try to save someone, anyone. The internal war he fought while facing these enemies was far more complicated than any physical fight. He was killing beings who, in a twisted way, were now like him. This filled him with a mix of rage and crushing loneliness, eating away at him with every strike. But the greatest challenge was yet to come, the other Hashira. If Rengoku had been present during the fight against the demons on Nadagumo Mountain, he would have become an immediate threat to the other pillars. They had faced each other several times before, but never so personally. Giyu, Shinobu, Mitsuri, and even Kanao, who had all fought demons, would now be confronting one of their own leaders. It wouldn't just be a battle of strength, it would be a fight for principles, honor, and humanity. How would the other Hashira handle Rengoku, knowing he was someone who represented everything they fought to protect, but was now on the opposite side? Giyu, with his calm and calculating style, would be the first to grasp the complexity of the situation. He had always been the most reserved, but this personal confrontation with Rengoku, a friend and mentor, would be hard to swallow. He would have to weigh his loyalty as a demon slayer against what he knew was right. It wouldn't be just about defeating Rengoku, but about saving him, or at least giving him a dignified death. This would create an emotional tension never seen before in other arcs. Shinobu, with her cold logic, would also see the situation differently. She would view Rengoku as an irreplaceable loss. Though she was calculating and focused on the greater good, the pain of losing someone like Rengoku, someone so full of honor and determination, would drastically affect her decisions. She would likely try to stop him with her own weapons, but she knew he was an unstoppable force. The fight would be a kind of silent lament on her part, because she would see in Rengoku everything she hated, a powerful demon without a human soul, without his true self. On the other hand, Mitsuri and Kanao would probably struggle emotionally even more. Mitsuri, with her huge heart, had always been the most sensitive among the pillars, and the idea of having to fight Rengoku would devastate her inside. She was the embodiment of unwavering kindness, and seeing her longtime friend now become what they hunted, the embodiment of everything he once fought against, would be very hard to process. Mitsuri would be forced to fight, but not with a light heart. The pain of having to do it would be a psychological burden, like fighting a part of herself. But the most emotionally intense moment would come with Tanjiro. Rengoku's internal battle wouldn't just be against his own demons, but against the love and admiration Tanjiro had for him. Tanjiro wouldn't see just an enemy before him, but someone who had always been his mentor. He would have a clear mission, but also a secret personal goal to save Rengoku. For Tanjiro, the Demon Slayer mission would become less important than saving someone he saw as a hero and example. This would create one of the most painful fights with a deep moral dilemma. On one side, he would have to fulfill his duty as a demon slayer, and on the other, he would want to fight not to kill, but to save the soul of the mentor who had turned into a demon. This wouldn't just put Tanjiro in a tough spot, it would also put him at odds with the rest of the team, who would see this desire as a weakness. But for Tanjiro, it would be a matter of personal choice, a moral dilemma where saving was more important than revenge. When the fight finally unfolded, the scene would be heartbreaking. Rengoku, now a demon, facing the very team of demon slayers he once led, a group that had once stood united by the fire of honor, now split by the fire of destruction. Rengoku's flames would become a deadly threat, but also a reflection of his internal struggle. What would happen at the end of this battle? Could Rengoku be saved? Or was he doomed to be consumed by the demonic flames that now ruled his being? The real question hanging over everyone was there a way back to his humanity, or was he lost forever in the abyss of what he had become? This arc wouldn't be just about the physical confrontation between Rengoku and the other demon slayers, but about a clash of souls, where on one side, the flame of honor still burned, and on the other, demonic shadows tried to consume everything he loved. Natagumo Mountain would become the stage for a deeper battle, with a fine line between killing and saving. The real fight happening in Rengoku's heart and in Tanjiro, who sought at all costs to preserve the soul of the man he once called mentor. As the fight raged on Natagumo Mountain, tension grew, and the ground where Rengoku and his former comrades faced off became increasingly unpredictable. With every exchanged blow, the demon inhabiting the flame pillar's body intensified, and the flame that once symbolized his strength to protect the innocent now became a destructive, uncontrollable force. More than anyone, Tanjiro was caught up in this conflict. His eyes, still full of admiration and love for Rengoku, became a reflection of pain and confusion every time he was forced to strike back, even when he didn't want to. In his heart, he still believed there was a chance to save Rengoku. He wanted more than anything for his mentor to return to his true self. But while his mind searched for a solution, His sword rose with the intent to defend his friends and fulfill his duty as a demon slayer. He was torn between the instinct to fight and the desire to save his friend. Doubt began to eat away, not only at Tanjiro, but the whole group. Gyu, always rational, found himself overwhelmed by a feeling he never thought he'd experience: hesitation. He knew he had to defeat Rengoku, but the strength of their bond, the loyalty between pillars, made it impossible to see him as just another demon to be exterminated. The situation was even more complicated when he realized that deep down, Rengoku didn't want to be there. He didn't want to be a demon, but the demonic nature was taking over, and the clash between who he was and what he had become was reflected in his attacks. Every time he struck his friends, a part of his humanity still screamed inside, making everything even more intense and painful. Shinobu, always pragmatic and calculating, was probably the most willing to end the fight, but her heart wasn't immune to the suffering either. She knew victory meant losing Rengoku forever, something that for her was more than just a matter of life and death. It was a loss of something she didn't even realize she had. Rengoku had always represented honor and kindness. She saw him as an example of everything she wanted to be, a flame that lit up the darkness around her. Killing that man was no longer just a matter of duty, but a sacrifice of something deeply human. What made everything even harder was Rengoku's immense power. As a high-ranking demon, he was no longer a common enemy. His demon regeneration made him nearly immortal, and every attack from the Hashira seemed to only fuel the fire inside him. His black flame attacks were so powerful that even the most experienced Hashira were forced to use all their strength just to defend themselves. Mitsuri, with her unique abilities, was one of the most effective. Her agile attacks had no direct effect on him, and she knew she couldn't face him alone. For her, the battle was no longer just a fight between demon slayers and demons, but a battle for the future. She feared the moment when Rengoku would finally be consumed by the demonic flames, leaving behind only the ashes of a hero. The idea of saving him became the most fragile thread of hope, yet the strongest of all. Tanjiro, tears in his eyes, kept trying to get closer to Rengoku. Speaking from his heart, he talked about what Rengoku meant to him, what he represented to everyone, how he could still be saved, how his spirit was still there, fighting against the darkness consuming him. But the fight inside Rengoku wasn't something words could simply erase. The demon transformation wasn't a light curse. It came with a weight that drained his inner strength. With every clash, Rengoku began to realize his battle was no longer against his friends, but against the very monster he had become. His soul struggled against the destruction he now embodied, against the inner screams telling him he shouldn't be this being of fire and hatred. He didn't want to be just an instrument of death, but his human memories were rapidly fading under the need to hunt and destroy, typical of a demon. He looked at Tanjiro, at the other Hashira, and saw what could have been, but the distance between them seemed insurmountable. Meanwhile, Akaza, seeing that his new ally was drifting away from his loyalty, stepped into the battle. He knew he had to act, that Rengoku couldn't be left at the mercy of the human feelings consuming him. Akaza always wanted to see Rengoku as a powerful weapon by his side, but now that he was being torn apart internally, he knew he couldn't let him slip from the demon's grasp. To Akaza, Rengoku represented a threat if not fully dominated by his demonic nature. Akaza's presence on the battlefield made things even more complicated. He tried to manipulate Rengoku's feelings, offering more power, suggesting that if he completed his transformation, he could become stronger and rule hell alongside him. But the problem was that Rengoku was starting to refuse this. He didn't want to be just another pawn in Akaza's hands, and his internal struggle grew more intense. When Tanjiro finally got close to Rengoku, he felt a glimmer of hope. Rengoku still had light. There was still something human inside him that could be saved. But the lingering question was, would it be too late? The fight continued, with the Hashira doing their best, not only to defeat him, but also to find a way to save Rengoku's soul. The battle was no longer just between demon slayers and demons, but between good and evil, between humanity and monstrosity. Tanjiro knew he couldn't just destroy Rengoku, but what do you do when a friend becomes an enemy? How do you hold on to hope amid destruction? With every attack, with every word from Tanjiro, there was a spark of possibility that Rengoku could be redeemed, but the weight of fate and his demonic nature dragged him deeper into darkness. Now, the Hashira were no longer just fighting the demons of Mount Natakumo, but the loss of one of their most valuable pillars. Saving Rengoku became not only a necessity for humanity's sake, but a personal and emotional matter affecting everyone around him. And as the battlefield filled with fire and pain, one truth remained. Somewhere inside Rengoku, the flame of humanity still burned. The question was, how long could it resist the darkness closing in? In the next arc, the Infinity Train, or Mugen Train, things would get even more complicated with Rengoku now transformed into a high-ranking demon. He would probably find himself in situations where he'd have to make impossible decisions, like whether to save humans who crossed his path or follow the demon's urge, screaming at him to kill, or when he came face to face with Tanjiro, the focus of his emotional pain. Tanjiro represented everything Rengoku once was, and seeing this boy so committed to good and justice would be a painful reflection of what he lost when he became a demon. Rengoku would become a key player in the fight against Muzan, but this internal conflict could be the very reason he would become a pivotal figure in the battle between demons and demon slayers. He would be a threat to humanity, but he could also become a threat to Muzan if his humanity stayed alive. Now, let's talk about his relationship with the other Hashira. Rengoku's reunion with his former demon slayer comrades would undoubtedly be tense, not just because he's now a demon, but because he used to be a symbol of honor, courage, and leadership. Just imagine the scene. Gyu, who's always been the quiet one, would be the first to notice something was very wrong. Rengoku was always someone he trusted, but now he couldn't see him as a battle brother anymore. What do you do when your own leader becomes such a powerful enemy? Shinobu, with her extremely pragmatic view, would quickly realize that although the emotional bond still existed, the logic of the situation would force her to act coldly. Killing Rengoku wouldn't be about pride, but necessity. However, how could she do that knowing he was the pillar of the flame who always believed in good? This psychological dilemma would make the battle even harder. It would be impossible for Shinobu to completely shut down her emotions, especially knowing deep down in her heart that Rengoku was still fighting to hold on to his humanity. And who could forget Mitsuri? She was the embodiment of love and kindness among the Hashira, and her reaction to seeing Rengoku as a demon would probably be one of utter anguish. She saw him as a kind of model of perfection, an unbeatable soul full of courage. The emotional shock of having him now as an enemy would be devastating. Mitsuri would fight, but it would be a fight full of tears. Her kindness was something even her sharp blade couldn't suppress. Now, with Tanjiro also involved, the issue runs even deeper. He never had a mentor as close as Rengoku, and losing that guiding figure would be devastating. Tanjiro could be the key to Rengoku making a final choice between being a destructive demon or a savior of humanity's flames. Maybe deep down, Rengoku wanted redemption, but to get there, he'd have to face the very hell inside himself. Over time, Rengoku's power would attract Muzan's attention, who would see this new demon as a threat to his reign. Muzan, who has always been obsessed with absolute control, would try to manipulate Rengoku to serve his own interests. But he would soon realize that Rengoku wouldn't be easily dominated. Even as a demon, Rengoku's honor and family ties were deeply engraved within him. This would mean that at some point, he could rebel against Muzan, becoming not only a threat to the demon slayers, but also a threat to Muzan himself. However, Rengoku couldn't fight Muzan with full strength without first facing the conflict inside him. He would have to decide whether to keep fighting internally to stay true to his humanity or surrender completely to his demonic nature and let his fate be controlled by Muzan. Ultimately, what might save Rengoku wouldn't be physical strength, but his determination to keep the flame of his soul burning. The battle to come would be more than a simple fight between slayers and demons. It would be a fight for Rengoku's soul, a chance to save something precious that could be lost forever. Now, we reach the Demon Association arc, where the story truly heats up. Picture this: Rengoku, now a high-ranking demon, right in the middle of the biggest battle against Muzan, the Demon King. The game of loyalty and challenges that unfolds here turns everything into a grand, epic war of wills. Let's explore what would happen if Rengoku were directly involved in this showdown. Muzan, as the Demon King, is an extremely cautious and controlled guy, almost paranoid. To him, anything or anyone with enough power to challenge his authority is a potential danger. And who's more dangerous than a high-class demon with the power of hellfire and immortality to back it up? Of course, at first, Muzan would probably be suspicious of Rengoku, and it wouldn't be easy for the Flame Demon to win him over as an ally. Muzan isn't someone who makes concessions. He hates the idea of losing control over any of his subjects. So the big question is, would Rengoku submit completely to his will? Or in the heat of battle, would he see Muzan as the true enemy and try to challenge him? This would completely shift the balance between demons and demon slayers, because with Rengoku in the mix, he'd become a direct threat to Muzan's reign. Imagine the scenario. Rengoku could become the Trojan horse inside the Demon Association. Muzan would try to use his loyalty if he could even gain it. But what he doesn't know is that no matter how demonic Rengoku becomes, he still carries the legacy of his humanity. This would mean that, perhaps unintentionally, he could sabotage Muzan's own plans, serving as a spark of resistance within the demon army itself. A part of him still wanted to fight evil, even as a demon. This would create a very interesting psychological conflict between submission and rebellion. Now, if Rengoku had been present in the final battle against Muzan, the dynamics of that fight would have changed drastically. Before, everything was focused on the unity of the demon slayers, who needed to destroy Muzan at all costs. But with Rengoku in the middle of the war, the battle would become a true clash of wills and loyalties. Imagine the chaos. On one side, the Demon Slayers united to take down Muzan, and on the other, Muzan himself, trying to maintain his absolute control over the Demon Association. Now, Rengoku would be an unpredictable piece on the board. He could be helping the Slayers, but the question was, how far would he go? He wouldn't be exactly a full ally to the Slayers, not after turning into a demon. Muzan himself could manipulate Rengoku, trying to use him to destroy the Slayers and strengthen his grip over the demons even more. The battle would be like a big dance of egos and conflicting intentions. Muzan trying to control Rengoku, and Rengoku, in turn, struggling against the temptation to fully give in to the darkness. At the same time, he would remember his family and his original mission as a demon slayer. Here, he wouldn't just be another villain, but a complex antagonist whose own internal struggle could decide the fate of the battle. Now, think about the best-case scenario. Rengoku, in a moment of clarity, could become a true key player in defeating Muzan. Not only would he help the Slayers, but he could also be responsible for destabilizing Muzan at the crucial point of the fight, helping the Slayers defeat the Demon King in a completely unexpected way. He could sabotage Muzan's plans from the inside out, almost like a spy in disguise, an infiltrator who hasn't fully given in to evil. But the question would never be simple. Even with his lingering humanity, Rengoku would have moments when his demonic nature took over. And that means that alongside the Slayers, he might explode with rage or give in to the urge to kill. This would make the final fight even more unpredictable, turning it into not just a battle of strength, but also an emotional and moral struggle for Rengoku's soul. Now, a super important part of this story of Rengoku as a demon would be his final sacrifice, and this is where the story gets truly tragic and symbolic. When everything reaches a breaking point, when the battle with Muzan hits its peak, Rengoku, as a demon, could make a final decision that reflects his true inner struggle to sacrifice himself to save others. Here, Rengoku would have the chance to redeem himself. Even after all the transformation, he could realize that the only way to really help his friends in the world was by giving up his own life. It would be a huge sacrifice given the power he now holds as a demon, but in the end, he would know it was the right thing to do. He would choose to die to save those he swore to protect, and maybe even secure the future of humanity. That sacrifice, even as a demon, could be the most emotional and deeply tragic moment of the arc. Because in the end, Rengoku would still be a hero, even with his demonic transformation. He would still hold on to his honor, his courage, and his desire to protect those he loved. Rengoku's sacrifice, dying to defeat Muzan, would carry huge emotional weight, reminding everyone that even in the darkest circumstances, humanity can always find a spark of light. With his death, Rengoku wouldn't just become a tragic hero, but also a symbol of the struggle between humanity and monstrosity. His journey as a demon would be the story of someone who lost everything, but still found a way to redemption, even in the harshest circumstances. This twist in his character, from a pillar of flame to a demon who finds his own end to save others, would give the series an emotional complexity we wouldn't have seen otherwise. And maybe after his death, Rengoku's flame would still live on in the hearts of everyone he touched as a reminder that the fight against darkness is not just physical, but also moral. If Rengoku's transformation had been more than just a simple villain turn, but a deep human experience, he would become one of the most emotionally rich characters in Demon Slayer, showing that even in the darkest shadows, the light of humanity can still shine.